Hi, this is the Phoenix Real Estate Cat, and I'm standing in for Jamie Levy on her website, realestateofaz.com. Today, the video, we're going to be talking about a little bit about mortgage history. A quote I have here from Henry Hoagland, who was a member of the Federal Home Loan Board, was a tremendous surge of residential building in the last decade was matched by an ever-increasing supply of homes sold on easy terms. The easy term plan has a catch. Only a small decline in prices is necessary to wipe out equity. Now, he said that in 1935, but I think you can see that that would be something that applies to us today. I know when I was in high school, there was a quote up on the wall in my history class that said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And in some ways, I think we're doing that today. In the early part of the 20th century, homebuyers didn't have all the creative options that we have today. Usually they paid cash, or they had something called a straight mortgage, where they put 50% down on the home, and then they made interest-only payments for about 3 years, and then had to pay the loan in full at the end of that time. They often would roll that over, so the payoff time on the loan was probably on average about 5 to 7 years to pay off the home loan completely. And if you look at newspapers from that time, or even in the church bulletins, they would have parties to celebrate paying off that mortgage, and they would actually burn the mortgage document to celebrate. I know in recent times there are not a lot of mortgage burning parties, well, at least not for the same reasons. And what they did to get into trouble is they started putting essentially what was a second mortgage over top of those 50% straight mortgages. And those were partially amortizing loans, and you still had probably 20-30% equity in the home. So their easy loan terms were quite different than what we have today. In the 1920s, just like George Bush did in the early 2000s, Harding and Hoover, who was then, I believe, Secretary of Commerce, were pushing to increase home ownership rates. And shortly after they did that and home ownership rates increased, we were looking at 1929 and all the fun that entailed. And if you've been paying attention to recent history, we went through and are still trying to come out of a mortgage crisis. People in the 1920s would have no concept of the level of creative financing that's taken place in recent history. Roughly, 80 years later, consumers could get zero down loans, they could essentially have bad credit, and they would get reasonably good interest rates. Home values were just going up like gangbusters, and more renters were turning into homeowners, and investors were rushing in to take advantage of the market and the increasing values that were there. Now, after all of that, we have a record number of foreclosures. Home prices have fallen like nobody has seen, and the interest rates are still really low. In fact, the interest rates we're quoting are the same as I was seeing in newspaper ads for the 1940s. To refinance out of those straight mortgages, they were advertising 15-year loans for 4 to 6% interest. And if any of you are old enough to remember the 1980s, the recession we had then, interest rates get up into the high teens to finance a house. Recently, and I've probably gotten this email from a half a dozen different sources, but John Paulson, who's the hedge fund manager who bet that the subprime market was going to crash and burn and made a fortune, he recently said that it's the best time to buy a home in 50 years. If you don't own a home, buy one. If you own one, buy another one. And if you own 2 homes, buy a third and let your relatives lend them the money to buy another home. So just as in the past, there will be people who will take advantage of this buying opportunity and will profit substantially in the years to come. And the question is, are you going to be one of them? So I want to thank you for listening. Appreciate any feedback you might have or suggestions for future videos. And again, I encourage you to support the real estate cat over the tiger that Jamie is currently looking for. So thank you. You all have a great day.